Begin today the Gemara towards the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Beis, the Gemara, right after the Mishnah. So this Perek is discussing Shavuos HaPikoden, one that swears falsely about the Pikoden, a deposit that he has in his possession. So the Gemara Rav Ache bar Hune v'Rav Shmuel berei the Rabbe bar Chone v'Rav Yitzchak berei the Rav Yehuda. These three Amiroim Tanu Shavuos bei Rabbe. They learned Masechta Shavuos by Rabbe. So now Pagabu Rav Kahana met them. So Amalahu, he asked them the following shaila: Hizid b'shvuos hapekadon, in a case where a person swore regarding a pekadon deliberately, he lied about this, that he doesn't have it, but not only that, v'hisru boy, he was warned by Eidim in advance. Eidim said, we saw that you got this pekadon, and you're claiming that you never got it and you don't have it. It's a lie, and they warned him not to swear falsely. What would be the halacha mahu? What's the halacha in such a case? What's the shaila here? So as we learned in the Mishnah, that in a case of Shavuos HaPikoden, there's an exception that over here, you chayiv to bring a carbon osham, even if it's a mezid, not only for a shaygig. So therefore now the Gemara has a shaila, what's going to be if he not only did it b'mezid, but he got a warning? So do I say, even the chidushu the b'chol ha'torah le'ashcha mezid the ma'isi carbon, since this whole concept that you bring a carbon for a mezid is a novelty, because usually you don't find in Torah that you bring a carbon for a mezid, and v'hacha, ma'isi carbon, and here you do bring a carbon. Rashi does point out that this is not the very only case where you bring a carbon for a mezid. There are other cases. There's 4 cases in total. It's by a shivcha, by a nazir, Shavuos Ha'edus as well. But this is still a novelty. It's a unique thing that you bring a carbon for a mezid. So therefore, maybe I would say that Lo yishna asrubei doesn't make a difference if you got a warning. V'lo yishna lo yasrubei, even if or he did not get a warning. Here, this is a novelty that the Torah says that you bring a carbon for a mezid, and if you bring a carbon, it's only carbon. That's it, the carbon asham, and there's no malchus as it would usually be for someone that is over a lav. That's one option to say. Or maybe the halacha would be this chiddush of the Torah that you bring a carbon for a mezid is if you didn't get a warning. But if there's Eidim that know that he has this pekadon and they warned him about this, not to swear falsely, so in such a case the chiddush of the Torah does not apply. Milki loki, so here like every lav he would get malchus, and carbon maisi, and that carbon he would not bring. Or a third option the Gemara says is hav dina, maybe both. In a case where it was b'mezid with a warning, because it was with a warning, so it's like every lav that'll get malchus, and additionally, he has to bring the carbon asham, which is the chiddush of the Torah here regarding the Shavuos HaPikoden. Amalei, so they answered him, they answered Rav Kahana, Tanina. We learned this in a Braisa. The Braisa says as follows, Chamura heimena Shavuos HaPikoden. This halacha of a person that swears falsely regarding a pekadon is more severe than a person swearing falsely by edus when he knows a testimony. What is that chumrah? Shechayaven al zadayna makis, that if he did this b'mezid, he swore falsely b'mezid, he would be chayiv malkis. Mal shigigasa, and that b'sheigig is chayiv an osham b'kesav shkolim. He has to bring a carbon osham, and it has to be of a worth of 2 kesav shkolim. That's what it says in the Braisa. This is the chumrah of Shavuos HaPikoden. So what do you see here? Midika Omar, the word lay is extra here. Midika Omar, al zadaina makis. It says here that for b'mezid you would get malchus. So when could you get malchus? The klal da'asribe. It must be that he was warned. You never get malchus unless there was a warning. Ve'ka Omar, what does this Braisa say? Makis. It says you get malchus. That means makis and you get malchus. But carbon loy. There's no carbon in a case that he was warned. So you clearly see this Braisa is saying that in a case where he was warned and he swore falsely, b'mezid, there's malchus. And the Gemara explains, why is this a chumrah that if you get malchus as opposed to Shavuos Ha'edus where it's a carbon, why is malchus more severe than a carbon, more stringent than a carbon? Because the nichalele inish, the ma'isi carbon v'lei lilki. A person would rather bring a carbon, it'll cost him money, but not to get malchus, which would be, it's physically painful. So therefore this is the chumrah of Shavuos HaPikoden. But the point is we clearly see here that for b'mezid you get malchus and not a carbon. This was the proof that they brought him. So now, Amalu Rabbi Bariti said, not necessarily is this Braisa a proof. Why? Because we can say that this Braisa is a different Tana that argues on the whole entire concept. Man Tana, Zodn Shavuos HaPikoden, Leinitn LeKapare. Who is a Tana that holds that by Shavuos HaPikoden, if you swear b'mezid, there is no carbon at all, meaning the whole basis of the ibaya of the Gemara was based on what it said in the Mishnah that Shavuos HaPekadon is an exception, that you bring a carbon even for mezid. But we learned before, this was on Daf Lamed Dalet in the previous Perek, there the Gemara brought that there is a Tana that disagrees with this, and he says that for Shavuos HaPekadon, b'mezid, there is no carbon. Who is this? Rab Shimon. It's Rab Shimon, so therefore we could say this Braisa here that says that there's only a Malchus and no carbon, it's not a proof to Ari Bayit because it's a different opinion altogether. It's Rab Shimon, and the Gemara there before brought, Rab Shimon says that you learn out Shavuos HaPekadon from Me'ilah, just like by Me'ilah there's only a Asham B'Sheigig, so to Shavuos HaPekadon there's only a carbon Asham B'Sheigig. But we're discussing a different thing. We're discussing the Rabbanan that say that by Shavuos HaPekadon there is a carbon for Mezid. Says the Gemara, Aval Rabbanan, carbon nami maisi. But according to the Rabbanan, it could still be that you bring a carbon as well. So therefore, there's no raya from here. Okay, now, so that's the answer that Rabbi Bar Iti said. But now the Gemara says, Amalu Rav Kahane. Rav Kahane said, Bar mino dahi. Don't take into account what it says here in this Braisa, because the version that we read, the Braisa before, is not the way he has it. He says like this, the ano taninalo. I learned this Braisa, or I taught this Braisa. This is how I taught this Braisa. When it comes to the Shavuos HaPekadon, whether a person swore falsely, b'mezid or b'shoigig, what's the halacha? Asham b'kestav shkolim. He brings a carbon asham, but that has to be a value of kestav shkolim, 2 kestav shkolim. That's all the Braisa was saying. But it doesn't mention a word about Malchus. Only a carbon asham. Now, what is the Braisa saying? It's trying to say that this is a stringency that it has more than the Shavuos Eidus. Or my chumrah, what is the stringency of the fact that it brings a carbon? By Shavuos Eidus, you also bring a carbon. The chumrah is the ilo hasam. By Shavuos Eidus, what kind of a carbon do you bring? You can bring a chatos basdanke. You can bring a carbon chatos that has even a value. The Torah doesn't give any amount of what the value has to be. So it could even be a basdanka, which is the smallest coin. It's a ma, which is a sixth of a dinner, even a tiny amount of value. Mashenkin over here, the carbon by the Bahacha Asher Bekestav Shkolim. Here you have to bring the carbon. It has to be, as the pasuk says, 2 Kestav Shkolim. That's the chumrah. But it doesn't say anything about Malchus. Okay, but now the Gemara says, wait a minute. But if that's the case, it's saying here clearly that the chumrah of Shavuos HaPekadon is that you bring a carbon, and that's both a mezid and a shaygig. So if so, says the Gemara, v'ligmar mina, let us learn out from here and answer our iboye in the other way. Before we wanted to say that we could prove from here that by a mezid, if you got a warning, that you get Malchus. But now we're saying that no, it doesn't say a word about Malchus in this Braisa. It only says a carbon. So let's learn out from here that even if it was b'mezid with a warning, you bring only a carbon, and that's all. Says the Gemara, no, you can't learn from here because since the Braisa doesn't mention a word about Malchus, if it mentions Malchus, you know it's talking about a case of a warning, because you can't give Malchus without a warning. But if it doesn't mention anything about Malchus, just a carbon, so a carbon, it could be this Braisa speaking about a case where the person was not warned. So therefore, he brings only a carbon. But our Ibaya is in a case where the person was warned by Eidim in advance. Here, we don't know what the halacha would be, so there's no raya from here. Lishna achirine, that's what it says here in the Gemara, but these words seem to be extra. It's Gemara now is going to bring try to bring another raya, which is actually from our Mishnah. Tashamat said in the Mishnah, En chayavin al shigigasa, you're not chayiv by the Shavuos HaPekadon if the person was a complete shaygig, meaning he didn't realize that he has the Pekadon, because that's what's called an oinus regarding a Shavuah, when he didn't realize at all that he's swearing falsely. So ma'in chayavin, what is yichayiv? Al zedaina, Yechayev if it was b'mezid, the Mishnah says, and that's a asham b'kestav shkolim. Yechayev to bring a asham, that's a value of 2 kestav shkolim. So now, my love, b'dasr, the Mishnah says a mezid, it doesn't specify what kind of mezid, so wouldn't you think it includes also when he got a warning, and the Mishnah says even this mezid with a warning, he's chayev just a carbon asham, and not Malchus. That's the Gemara, not necessarily. We could say, even though the Mishnah didn't specify, but it only means in a case where he did not get a hasra, but with hasra, the punishment may be a carbon with Malchus, or maybe even only Malchus. Tashama, the Gemara tries to bring a rai from another Braisa. The Braisa says, now the context of this Braisa is not clear. As Rashi here says, he doesn't know exactly what the Braisa was trying to say, but one thing you see is that this Braisa was trying to compare the halacha of a nazir to Shavuos HaPekadon. And the Braisa is saying that you can't compare them. So now, loi, you can't compare the two because im amarta ben nazir tome. By a person that's a nazir, he's not allowed to become tome. It's this week's parsha actually, and if he was metame himself b'mezid, so it's a lav. So shekain loike. By a nazir, he gets malchus if he's metame himself. Taimar b'shvuas apekadon. However, by shvuas apekadon, the person swears falsely regarding a pekadon. Sheina loike. There's no malchus. So what do you see here in this brayse pretty clearly? Midika Omar loike. If it's saying that we're speaking about a case where there could be malchus, and by nazi you get malchus if he's metam himself b'mezid, m'klal da'asrbe. So the brayse is speaking about a case where it's b'mezid and he got a warning. Ve'ka Omar, the brayse clearly says, Toima b'shvuas ha'pekadon she'ena loike. That by shvuas ha'pekadon there's no malchus. Avol carbon maisi, but by shvuas ha'pekadon there is a carbon, the carbon asham that you bring even for a mezid. So if so, we clearly see that by a shvuas ha'pekadon you bring a carbon, but there's no malchus. So the Gemara says, no, maybe that's not the pshat of what the Braisa is saying. My ein loike, the Braisa is not pointing out a leniency regarding shvuas ha'pekadon. Maybe it's trying to point out a stringency in shvuas ha'pekadon. You know what it means when it says ein loike? The ein nifta b'malchus. What it's saying is that it's not enough, the fact that it only would get malchus. There's malchus and a carbon. Maybe that's what it's saying. So the Gemara says, but how could you say that that's a distinction between Shavuos HaPekadin and Nazir? Meklal, does that mean to say the Nazir Tomei, a Nazir that was metam himself b'mezid, niftar b'malchus, so he only gets malchus for this, and he doesn't bring a carbon, but that's not the case. Or carbon ksiv by a Nazir that was metam himself, what happens? He has to bring a carbon for this, and then after he brings the carbon, then he could start over the Naziris again that he took upon himself. So if so, how could you say that this brayse is making a distinction between Shavuos HaPekadon and Nazir, that by Shavuos HaPekadon there is a carbon and malchus, and by Nazir only malchus? There's a carbon there as well. So the Gemara answers, no. Hasam, the maisi carbon, by the Nazir, even if he brings a carbon, it's not as a punishment or as a consequence for this that he was metam himself. Over there it's different. In order to begin the new Naziris in purity, the carbon is the full purity to start the new Naziris. But for this that he was metame himself, there's just one thing, malchus. So therefore, we can still teach the brayse the way we did till now, that maybe it means to say that by Shavuos HaPekadon, you get malchus and a carbon as well. So the Gemara did not resolve the Sibaya. The Shaila the Gemara is asking here about a mezid with a warning by Shavuos HaPekadon. Yes, three options over here, right? If it's either just a carbon or a carbon with malchus or only malchus, the Gemara does not resolve this. Well, the Gemara takes this discussion now to, that from this comes out another Inyan. Amrua Rabbanon Kamei de Rabbe. See, these were the students that were learning by Rabbe, that the question was asked to them. So then these students went back to Rabbe and they told him this shaila regarding this case where he got a warning, and the question is what's done here? Is it malchus? Is it a carbon, or both? So Amalahu, Rabbi said to them, Miklal, from this that you have this kind of a shaila. What I understand over here is the chiloi asrubei, if it would be a case where he did not get a warning from these edim, but ve'ike edim, but there are edim that this person has the pekadon in his possession, and he swore falsely about this, mechayev, then he would be chayev to bring a carbon. That's what he understood from what they were saying. And so the whole shaila over here was because there's edim that are testifying, but if there would be no edim about this, in such a kind of case, so then it would be pasha to you that he would be chayiv a carbon. But the question is, Rabbi says, I disagree with this whole concept. Kfiras dvarim ba'almahu. In a case where there's edim that know that this person has this pekadon in his possession, and he's denying it, his denial won't get him anywhere because those edim are going to show up to Bezdin and say that he has it. So in a case where the person's denial ends up being just words alone, he cannot pater himself by this denial, he's not chayiv at all. So the Gemara says, Alme, Kasav Rabbe, from here we see that Rabbe holds a kaifer b'mamin, sheyeshal of edim, that the rule would be that a person that denies any money that he has in his possession that he owes someone, but this is money that there's edim about this, he's going to be pater. Why? Because even though he denied it, but his words are really worthless. Because the Edom are going to show up anyways and be mechayiv him. He's only chayiv if his words could have really pated him. That's what Rabbi held. So therefore Rabbi said, in a case where there's Eidim B'chlal, even without a warning, there's no chiyuv of a carbon at all. Okay, so now the Gemara will discuss this Chiddush of Rabbi. Amalei Rav Chanina l'Rabbi. So Rav Chanina says to Rabbi, Tanya de Messiah. I'll bring you a braise that basically says clearly, it says clearly like what Rabbi said. Why? Because the braise, it darshans, the pasuk says, V'kichesh ba, and he denied this. This is the pasuk where it speaks about a person denying a pekadin or money that he owes someone. So what's the term ba? That's an exclusion. Prat l'moide le'echad min ha'achin or le'echad min ha'shutfin. This excludes a case where a person owes money to brothers or partners, and he denied owing this to one partner or one brother, but he admitted to the other brother, to the other partner. So in such a case, he didn't fully deny, so in such a case, he'll be potter. That's the one niyat. Then the Braisa goes on to say, "V'nishba al sheker," he swore falsely. Prat l'loive b'shtar v'loive be'edim. This means excluding a case of a person that borrowed money with witnesses that are there, or borrowed money and there's a shtar, as a document on this. So in such a case, he can't lie about this, because edim are going to come and or the shtar is going to prove that it's not true. So this Braisa is basically saying the exact point that Rabbi said, that when a person swears falsely about money that he owes, but Edim will come or a shtar will prove that it's not true, so then what he denied is just words. He's just delaying paying this. So in such a case, he won't be chayiv. Amalei, but Rabbi said, if this Braisa you think is the source for what I said, this Braisa is not a proof to what I said. Why? Because what does it mean here when it says that because there's Eidim or because there's a shtar, so therefore he won't be chayiv? But Oimer, the case over here is that this person is not fully denying. He's saying Lavisi. Yes, I borrowed the money, but V'loi Lavisi be'Eidim. It wasn't in the presence of Eidim. Or he says Lavisi, I borrowed the money, but V'loi Lavisi b'shtar. It wasn't with a document, it wasn't with a shtar. That's what the person was denying. So this is mamish a kfiras dvarim. Here the person is not denying the money. He's saying, yeah, I owe the money, I'm ready to pay the money. He's just saying, the fact that you say that it was Eidim or a shtar, that's not true. So in such a case, it's kfiras dvarim, the words, he's not denying the money. That's what the Braisa meant, that'll be potter. And Rabbi says, I'll prove to you that this is what the Braisa is talking about. Mimai, how do I know? Midiktani, because it says in the beginning of the Braisa, V'kichesh ba prat l'moide lechad min ha'achin lechad min ha'shutfin. That this excludes a case of a person that admitted to one of brothers or of partners. So the question is, what does this Braisa mean? Hai le'echad min ha'achin heichidami. Why, if he was denying to one brother or one partner, would he be potter? What's the case here? If we're talking about partners, so let's say it's $100, and its partners, he owes one $50, and the other one he would owe $50. So if he only admitted to one partner, he says, "Oh, the $50 that I owe you, that's true." But so the question is, why would he be potter? The other one, the other $50, he completely denied. It shouldn't be any difference than any other case where a person swears falsely and he denies. So El Alav, it must be, what's the pshat here in the beginning of the Braisa? The Amri Lei, these brothers or partners say to this person, Mitarvinon Yazavta, you borrowed from both of us $100. Now V'amalahu, what does he say to them? Loi michad minaychi yasfi. Yes, I borrowed $100. But who did I borrow the $100 from? Not from the two of you together. I borrowed only from one of you. So in such a case, Avi like Kfir is Dvarim Ba'almeh, that when he's denying, it doesn't make any difference because he's going to have to pay the same $100. He's admitting that he owes the $100. Elamai, he's saying I borrowed it only from him. So if these brothers then say that you borrowed it from both of us, he'll pay the money to one brother, and then that brother will have to give $50 to his brother if he says that they borrowed it together, or they lent it together, that is. So therefore, says Rabbi, in the Reisha, it's speaking about a case where the person is mamish admitting that he owes the money, and it's just that he's denying who it is exactly that he owes the money to. So Sefer Nami Kfiras Dvarim, in the Sefer, when it says that it's a case where the person borrows the money with Eidim, it doesn't mean that he denied borrowing the money, he just denied the fact that it was with Eidim. But he admits that he borrowed the money. That's where the Braisa is saying that the person would be potter. But the Chiddush of Rabbi, though, there's no proof to. Rabbi said a bigger Chiddush. Even when the person denies the money, but just the fact that there are Eidim that in the future will come and testify that that money is owed, we consider what he denied to be Kfiras Dvarim, because eventually those Eidim could come and disprove his denial. So therefore he's going to be potter even in that case. That was Rabbi's Chiddush. Okay, now the Gemara will discuss and bring from other brises to disprove what Rabbi said. Simin, for the brises the Gemara brings, Chayva, Kitais, the Baal, Habayis, and Chaymer, Nazira. Okay, so the Gemara will bring from the Mishnah and from the brises that was actually quoted before. Toshama says in the brise, Eine Chayiv al Shigagasa, or this is actually the Mishnah. He's not Chayiv for a complete shaygig on a Shavuos Pekadon, but Umau Chayiv al Zadaina. What is he Chayiv if it was bemezid, that he swore falsly? Asham bekesef shkalim. He's Chayiv to bring the Karban Ashav that's worth a kesef shkalim, two kesef shkalim. So the Mishnah says he's Chayiv for bemezid. My love Zadin Eidim. Don't you think the Mishnah does not specify? It includes a case where it's bemezid, where there's Eidim that know that he has the Pekadon, and he's swearing falsely about this. Says the Gemara, Eloi Zadin Atzmai. It's referring to bemezid, where he knows that he has the Pekadon, but there are no Eidim that know anything about this. Eidim didn't see that he got this Pekadon, Eidim don't see that he has the Pekadon now, and that's when he would be Chayiv a Carbon, but if there's Eidim, then he will be Potter. Tashama, another diary the Gemara tries to bring that says, Hoyu Shtei Kite Eidim. This is actually a case of Shavuos Eidos, where Eidim are swearing falsely about testimonies that they know. And the Gemara is comparing the halacha of Rabbi regarding Shavuos HaPekadon, when a person denies, swears falsely, and his words really have no value because eventually Eidim will come and prove that he owes the money. So the Gemara is comparing by Shavuos Eidos the same thing. So what does it say by Shavuos Eidos? There are two groups of Eidim. So Kafra Rishayna, the first group of Eidim denied knowing this testimony, and they swore falsely about this. Then Vachka Kafra Shniya, then the second group of Eidim also swore falsely about this testimony. Shtei and Chayavis, they're both going to be Chayav for swearing falsely. Why? Each group separately could have testified about this case. Now the question is, well, how could I say this? Bishloi Mishniya to Chayiv. The second group of Eidim should be Chayiv to bring a carbon. The Hakafra la Katrishayna. Once the first group denied knowing the Eidos, so they're the only ones left. So when they deny, they're causing a real loss of money, because they're the only ones that would know. Now they're not going to testify; they cause a loss. But Erelishayna Mai Mechayve. When the first group of Eidim deny knowing testimony, why should they be Chayiv to bring a carbon? They're not causing any loss here. Even they're denying, but Hakay Mishniya, the second group of Eidim are still available, and they would be able to testify. So what do you see from here? That even in a case where they swear falsely about knowing this testimony, and there's no loss of money involved, it's just words, it's just saying that we don't know, and there's others that still could testify, you still chayiv. So the Gemara wants to prove from here that the same thing would be regarding Shavuos HaPekadon. When a person swears falsely about a Pekadon that he has, he's going to be chayiv, even if it's a case where there are Eidim, and his swearing falsely is not going to gain him anything, because those Eidim are going to show up and be mechayiv him anyways. So the Gemara answers, and we had this already before in the previous page, it can explain this. Amar Ravina, so Ravina explains, no, that's not the case of these two Eidim, of these two groups of Eidim here. The case is as follows. Hacha b'mayaskina, what is the case of it? Kagayin sha'isa, shniya, v'shas, kfiris, harishayna, kroivim b'nishasayim. In the time when the first group of Eidim was testifying or was swearing that we do not know any Eidos, the second group of Eidim were not able to testify, because these two Eidim, their wives are sisters, relatives or sisters, and therefore they're not fit to say Eidos together at all. So they're not the first group of Eidos are the only one that can testify. Now, Unashisaya and Geisesais, these wives that are sisters, they are Geisesais. They're on their deathbed, they're about to die. So now the time I would think to say Reiv Geises and Lemisa, that in a case where they're about to die, so we could consider them to be as if they already died, because most cases people die in such a case, and therefore the first Eidim that denied knowing the testimony could say, you have another group of Eidim, and they're not relatives anymore because their wives are about to die. Kamash Malan, so therefore the Mishnah there is saying that the first group of Eidim will be chayav because Hashtem Miyas Chayaninu, when they denied. The second group of Eidim could not testify because their wives that are relatives were still alive. They didn't die yet. That's the case over there. So you could still say that you're only chayiv for swearing falsely if the shvuah falsely actually is causing a loss of money. Tashama, the Gemara says, let's try to bring a rai from another case. So it says in a braise, Balabayis Shatan Tainas Ganav Pikod. Balabayis, he was given a deposit, and he claims that it was stolen. And then Evanishpa, he swears falsely about this, that it was stolen. But then V'haida, then he comes and admits that it was all a lie. Ubo Eidim, and later Eidim come and testify about this lie. So now, Imat Shaloi Bo Eidim V'Hoide, he admitted about this lie before the Eidim came and said that it was a lie. So then what's the halacha in such a case? Mishalim, Keren, he has to pay back the principal of what he denied. V'chaimish, and he also pays a fifth for this. And V'asham, and the Karban Asham. This is the case of the Shavuos of Pekadon, where he swears falsely, and you have to pay the Keren and a fifth and a Karban Asham. However, in Mishabo Eidim Oide, if first Eidim came and testified that this person is the Ganav himself, he's swearing that it got stolen, but he's stealing it himself. So, and then Haida, after Eidim came, now this person admits to this. In such a case, he has a halacha like a Ganav. He swore falsely that it was stolen, and he's stealing it himself. So he's a Ganav, and therefore Mishalam Tashlumi Kefil. Here he has to pay double, like a Ganav that pays Kefil, the Asham, and the Karban Asham. So what do you see over here? Obviously, this is a case where there's Eidim about this case. Eidim know that he has this Pekadon in his possession, and he's swearing falsely about this. And it says that he's chayav to bring a carbon, according to Rava, or Rabbi that is. If there's Eidim that know about this, you shouldn't be chayav at all. So the Gemara answers, Hachanami, we could say here as well, Kid Ravina, the same answer as Ravina said, when he swore falsely, those Eidim that knew that he had the Pekadon were not fit to testify, because their wives were relatives and they couldn't testify. And therefore, later those Eidim came, their wives died, and now the Eidim are able to testify, and later the Eidim testified. But B'Shas Ma'aseh, when he swore falsely, there were no Eidim about this, and therefore he would be chayiv.
Just make sure. Once they die, that's it. They can come.
Now they could testify, correct. That's the halacha by Eidim that are only relatives because of their wives. Once they die, they can testify, correct. Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Toshima, I'll bring you a raya from the Bryce that we had quoted before. Chamura mimena Shavuos HaPekadon. Shavuos HaPekadon is more stringent than a Shavuos HaEdus. Shechayavan al Zadoina Makis. The B'mezid is Malkis, Val Shigagasa, Osham B'Kesav Shkolim. And B'Sheigig, you bring the carbon Osham that's worth 2 Kesav Shkolim. So now, it says here that B'mezid is Malkus. There has to be Eidim about this, that they're warning this person. We know you have this Pekadon in your possession. Don't swear falsely about this. So if there's Eidim, and V'ka'amar, it says, Al Shigigasa, even when there are Eidim, and he swears B'Sheigig, Asham B'Kesav Shkolim, he brings a carbon Asham. So we see clearly, not like Rabbe, that even in such a case, there's a carbon Asham. Amalu Rav Mordechai, so Rav Mordechai says, Bar Minah Dahi, that do not take into account what it says in this Braisa, because the Ha'amalu Rav Kahana said, no, Taninullah, I taught this Braisa, and I taught it as follows. Echad Zdaina v'echad Shigigasa, whether B'Sheigig or B'mezid or B'Sheigig, Asham B'Kesav Shkolim. You bring the carbon Asham, and according to his version, as we had before, Malchus is not mentioned in this Braisa at all, so therefore not necessarily is there any Eidim, or anyone that's giving him any warning at all. Tashema, again the Gemara brings the Braisa that was quoted before, as the Braisa said, Loi, that we can't compare Shavuos HaPekadon to a Nazir. Im amarta ben Nazir, Tomei sheken loike. By a Nazir that becomes Tomei, he gets Malchus. Tomei b'Shavuos HaPekadon she'ena loike. By Shavuos HaPekadon, if he swears falsely, there's no Malchus. So now, Hechi Domi, what's the case here? Either leke Eidim, if in this case there's no Eidim at all, so then amai loike. Why would he get any Malchus? Malchus must be with Eidim that know that he's swearing falsely and they're warning him about this. So Elab Shite de Eidim. So the case over here must be that there are Eidim. V'katani, and what does it say? Toima b'Shavuos HaPekadon she'ena loike. That by Shavuos HaPekadon there's no Malchus. Milkahu delay lucky. So it's saying that there's no Malchus of a carbon maisi, but a carbon there definitely is. So the Gemara before said could be there's a carbon with Malchus, could be there's just a carbon, but there's definitely a carbon even in a case where there's Eidim that know that he swore falsely. Says the Gemara Tiyufta the Rabbe. So this refutes what Rabbe says. Again, Rabbi said in a case where there's Eidim and he swore falsely, he's not chayiv because the Eidim will eventually come and testify, so his words are just dvarim ba'alma to Yofte. This refutes what Rabbi says. According to Taisvis, the Ikke Chiddush of Rabbi was in a case where there's Eidim about this, that he swore falsely, but the Eidim are not present. There's Eidim somewhere, and they might come one day. Even then, for the Shavuos HaPekadon, he would be potter. That the Gemara refutes here. In a case, though, when the person swears falsely and the Eidim are right in front of us, in such a case, everybody would agree that the Shavuos HaPekadon is just words. It's nothing because the Eidim are standing right in front of us. And you see a similar thing here in the continuation of the Gemara. So like the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan said about this case that Rabbi spoke about, a person that denies owing money and there's Eidim that know that he does owe it, chayiv. He will be chayiv, as we just refuted what Rabbi said, and as I mentioned, according to Tosfos, when those Eidim are not right here. So then he'll be chayiv. V'shtar potter. If there's a shtar about this money and he owes, and he denies it, that is a case that, even though he swore falsely, he'll be potter. What's the reason? Why by shtar potter? So when I pop in my time that Rabbi Yochanan, what's the reason? Because Eidim avidi demaisi. The fact that there are Eidim that know, it doesn't mean that they're going to show up. Eidim can die. So therefore, when he swears falsely, he's trying to save himself money. Shtar hamanach, the shtar though, a document that the lender has, he has the document. He'll just bring the document into the bezdin. And therefore, in such a case, when he swore falsely about this, it doesn't help him anything, because you have a shtar. But Amalei Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua, Rav Papa, Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua says, no, this can't be the reason, because shtar and ami of the mirchas. Even regarding a shtar, although it's less likely that the shtar would not be available, and then Eidim that could die, but even a shtar could also get lost. So Elam Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua, so Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua says, Hainu Taimid Rav Yochanan. The reason for what Rav Yochanan said is Mishum Dahav Shtar Shibud Karkois. A loan that's written in a document, the payment, there's a shibud to collect from properties. And the rule is, ve'ein mevi'in carbon al kfiras shibud karkois. There's no carbon that you bring when you deny a loan that there's a shibud on karka. Regarding karkois, as we'll learn later in the Masechta, there's no halacha of a shvua. You don't swear regarding anything that's related to karka, and so too one that denies and swears falsely on something that's a loan of karka, there's also no carbon on this as well. Okay, there's a discussion here in Tosfos, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, really every single loan has a shibud on karka, because Menat Torah, there's a shibud on the karka. So it becomes difficult to understand how could you be chayiv a carbon for any kind of a loan. Okay, Tosfos, the Rishonim we've discussed, there are cases that you would be chayiv. Okay, so now here the Gemara brings actually that this is a machlokes also regarding Shavuos ha'edos, when Edom swore falsely regarding a testimony that's related to karka, would they be chayiv for this or not? So Itmar, we learned the machlokes mashbia edei karka. If one is having Edom that know a testimony about karka and they swore falsely about this, would they be chayiv or not? Says the Gemara, Pligibah, Rav Yochanan and Rav Elazar. Rav Yochanan and Rav Elazar argued about this chadom chayiv. One of them said that they still would be chayiv even if it's relation to karka. V'chad omar potter, and another opinion says that they're potter. So says the Gemara, Tistayin, I'll bring you a proof that Rav Yochanan and Omar potter. Rav Yochanan is the one that says that if it's regarding karka, you would be potter. Medom Rav Yochanan, because as we just quoted, Rav Yochanan said, Hakayfa b'mamash yeshal of Edom, one that denies having money, that there's witnesses that could testify about this, he's still going to be chayiv. However, if it's with a shtar, if there's a document about this that he owes, then potter. And now what's the reason that he's potter? Or could Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua? Like Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua said, because regarding karka, you're not chayiv if you swear falsely. So the same is also with Edom that swear falsely, knowing testimony about karka, that because it's in relation to karka, over here it'll be potter. The Gemara is soon going to bring the psukim as we see as the source for this. It says the Gemara, Testayim, this is a clear proof that it's Rav Yochanan that says that you would be potter. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Vo about this. Shall we say that this machlekes of Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Elazar is really the same machlekes of Tanaim, Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan? The Tanan, or the Tanya, we learned in Abraisa regarding Gzeila B'chlal, which is all in the same parsha in the Torah. This is all in the same place where the Torah speaks about this inyan in Parshas Vayikra. So over there, it speaks about swearing falsely, and also regarding a person that tried to steal and swore falsely about this. So the machlekes here is as follows: Hagoyzel Sodom Mechavere. A person stole a property from his friend, and then what happened? V'shotva Nohar, and a river came and flooded it and damaged the entire property. So he stole it, and now this is what happened when it was in his possession. Chayev lahamad lo yisada. So the Gazlan has to reimburse the owner and give him back the property in a good condition. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer holds that he's a Gazlan, and a Gazlan has the responsibility to return the property or whatever he stole. In this case, the property in its condition, the way it was when he stole it. The Chachamim say the halacha of Gzela does not apply here. He says to the owner, the property is here, take it as is. because the inyan of gzela only applies to metaltalin, to a movable object that the person steals and takes, then he has to return. With the property, the concept of gzela does not apply, and therefore he just leaves the karka and says to the owner, take it as is. Now, what's the source of the machlekes? And then it was said about this, what is the source of their machlekes? So it's here in this parsha, where it speaks about the person that swore falsely. So, Rabbi Eliezer dorish ribuye umiyute. Rabbi Eliezer darshans the psukim with the approach of a ribuy and a miyut. And Rabbanan darshi klali uprati. And Rabbanan darshan differently, they darshan with the approach of klal and prat. We had this before in the Masechta, and the Gemara here will explain what the difference is. Rabbi Eliezer dorish ribuye miyuti. So how do you darshan the pasuk? It starts off saying v'kichesh ba'misay. A person denies money that he owes. So he's basically a gazlan. He's organav. He denies this money. So that's riba. It's including any case that he's trying to steal. And then the pasuk goes on to say details. Whether it's a pikadon or when he borrowed money. So this is miyut. This is miyut. It's excluding. It's saying only these cases. So now, according to this approach of ribuy miyut, when it says a miyut, the miyut is not here to say only this. Miyut means an exclusion, meaning that after the ribuy in the beginning of the pasuk, and then the Torah says a miyut, it means that it has to be something that is similar to the ribuy in the beginning of the pasuk, but not only what it says in the beginning of the, not only the pekadnem sesumas yad, anything that's similar. That's what miyut means. And then it says again a ribuy. Oy mikol asher yishova, anything that a person denies and swears falsely, chazav riba, it says again a ribuy. Riba umiyat v'riba, when you have, so according to this approach, when there's a ribi first, and then there's a miyut. Now the miyut itself would say that I'm emayit things that are not similar to the ribui, but things that are similar are included. But then it says a ribui again, so then I say riba hakoil. Well, because it says a ribui again, that's marbe everything. So my riba kol mili. That means in anything that a person denies owing someone, anything that he steals, he would be chayev to pay for this. He's a gazlan. What is it that we do exclude? So you only exclude one case that's the most obscure, the most not similar, and that is miyut shtaris. If a person is stealing a document, because the document is not money itself, it's just a document that could be used for proof that someone owes you money, and if a person is stealing a document, over there's no din of gezela. That's the only thing that it excludes. Everything else, though, is included in gezela, so therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, even stealing karka is a din of gzela, and you have to pay back the karka. If it got flooded, you have the responsibility, like a gazlan, to return it as in its original condition. Now, Rabbanan darshan klali prati. However, Rabbanan darshan differently. They darshan klal prat. What does klal prat mean? The kichesh ba'misay is klal, anything that you deny. Then it says b'pikadnei b'sesumas yad begezel. That's prat. That's a detail, and according to this approach, prat means ein b'chlal ela masha b'frat, meaning it's only this, not only what's similar to this. Prat means this is spelling out that it's only this. And then it adds, it says a second klal. Now I say it's a klal, uprat, uklal, a second klal. Now I say, prat. Here I say, the second klal comes to say that it's not only the prat, which is dafka, only the prat, but it's anything that's similar to the prat. So what does it mean? Ma prat meforish, just like it has to be only what's similar. So what's the prat? It's a dova metaltal, has to be a movable item. That's what the pasuk is spelling out, and has to be the gufei mamin, something that has value of money for itself. I've called dova metaltal the gufei mamin. It has to be something which is metaltal and it has a value of money. Yotze karkois, therefore it excludes properties. Why? Kshe'ei metaltal, they don't move around, and also yotze avodim shehok shel karkois, it excludes slaves that are compared to karka in the Torah. And also yatsu shtares, and it excludes a person that steals documents, sha'ava pishem metaltalin and gufumamin, even if they are movable, but they don't have value of money in itself. So therefore, the Rabbanan say, if one steals a karka, the responsibility of paying back and reimbursing the condition of the karka does not apply. Okay, but the Rishonim they'll do say, Rashi, the Rambam also says, it doesn't mean that you're allowed to steal karka. You're not allowed to kick a person out of his karka. What it means is the halacha of returning the responsibility of reimbursing and giving him back the karka in the original condition does not apply, but the issur of stealing definitely applies. Okay, so now the Gemara says, here we see an argument in this parsha, it's the same parsha, where it talks about the halacha of swearing falsely. There's a machlokes whether it applies to karka or not. So Naman the Mechayev, one that says that you're chayev for swearing falsely on karka, and also regarding edus, which is in the same parsha, the edim that swear falsely, So Karab Eliezer, he holds like Karab Eliezer that learns the pasuk that it includes karka. Oman the Patar, the opinion that says that if you swear falsely regarding a testimony on karka, it follows the Rabbanan's opinion that say that the parsha is not speaking about karka. The klal prat klal excludes karka. So it seems like that the machlekes amiroim is based on this machlekes tanoim. So Amalei Rabavo answers and says, loy, not necessarily are they dependent on each other. And he explains like this: Man the mechayev, the one that says that you are chayev when you swear falsely on the karka, that you're right. Karab Eliezer, he must be following Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that the parsha here is speaking about karka. But Amanda Patar, the one that says that you'll be potter when you swear falsely on the karka, Adam, that swear falsely about this testimony on karka, Amalach will tell you, Baha, regarding this detail, Afilah Rabbi Eliezer Maide, even Rabbi Eliezer will be Maide, that for karka you potter, because the Rachmana Omar Mikael, Veloy Hakael. The lashon of the pasuk is Mikael, that a person swears falsely, Mikael, I have the full pasuk over here, but because he uses the term Mikael, so therefore it's coming to exclude karka regarding this false shvuah. And therefore, even if regarding gzela you would be chayiv, but regarding the shvuah, this is another exclusion that excludes karka. Okay, let's finish off one more thing here. The Gemara tries to bring a raya from our Mishnah. Amar Rav Papa Mishmei derave masnisa nami deike. I'll bring you a raya from our Mishnah that Rabbi Yechanan is right, that there's no chiyav of a shvuah on karka. Diktani, because what is one of the examples it says in our Mishnah? Ganaftas avdi. Ganafta shayda that is. A person says to his friend, you stole my ox. Voima loy ganafti. I did not steal the ox. Mashbiyachan, he swear from me on this. V'amar amen, and he responds, amen chayiv. So for this, he's chayiv. So the Gemara says, why does he use an example of an ox? Vilu ganafta as avdi loy katani. It doesn't say the example that he stole his slave. Even though the Mishnah afterwards speaks about a slave, but it doesn't say an example of stealing a slave. My time, why not? Lav mishum de'eved, iskish lekarkois, because by a slave, you would be potter. Because a slave is compared to karka. There's no carbon for a false shvuah if it's denying a shibit karkais, and the same with a slave. So the Mishnah chooses dafka, the case of a shir. Rav Papi Mishmei derave, but Rav Papi says in the name of Rave, no, there's no raya from a Mishnah, because in the Sefer of the Mishnah you could learn out the opposite. Aim Sefer, the end of the Mishnah concludes and says, Zeh haklal, the rule here is as follows: Kol ha-meshalem al pi atzmai. Anytime a person is denying something that even if he would admit this, he would be chayiv to pay, that's any money payment, chayiv. He's the chayiv for swearing falsely. But if it's a knas, and then if you would admit it, he would be potter, then potter. If he denies this, he would be potter. So now zeh haklal, the Mishnah that adds this klal after it said all the details, la suya mai. What more is it coming to include? So lav, don't you think it's coming to include la suya ganaftas avdi? A case that the Mishnah did not explicitly say, even when someone is claiming that you stole my slave. So you have, from the ratio of the Mishnah, it seems like a slave is not included, but from the diak of the Sefer, it would seem that you would have to include a slave. So Ella says the Gemara, because from the Mishnah it's not clear how to be medayik, so therefore we can't bring any proof from the Mishnah to this machlekes whether you chayiv on the false shvuah regarding karka.